This is from Friday. Anderson Cooper hosting Rami Igra, former head of Israeli intelligence. I mean, my sense is what's going on with these type of guests is that former military personnel, former intelligence personnel, former government officials are going out and they're basically saying the stuff that the Israeli government wants to say, but realizes that they can't really say anymore out loud because it becomes problematic from them from a public relations standpoint.
They may say it to local Israeli papers and not in English, but they send out these folks who are not still, currently affiliated with the Israeli government, but have the same positions to say that stuff in English on U.S.
Right.
outlets.
I mean, I'm quite convinced this is like, one way in which the Israeli government is trying to sort of like create space for some of these horrific ideas.
If there's one thing we know about intelligence guys, it's that when they retire, they have nothing to do with the intelligence service.
Right, that never happens. But here is Anderson Cooper, and it is it's funny. Like, we're being very careful here not to injure civilians, but incidentally, we could.
Rami, what does fighting in the South look like to you? I mean, if there are hundreds of thousands, I mean, there's 50 people living in homes, people are just sleeping anywhere they can. What does that look like? How do you operate in that environment?
Well, the South is a big word, and in the South there are several areas. We have been asking the Gazans to move to the Mawasi area, which is the area closest to the sea. And this is where the big 10 cities have been established. Fighting in the South in Han Yunis does not mean that we're fighting in the same area. And as you've seen in the last couple of weeks, the fighting is very surgical. It is slow. It is very methodical. We are trying not to reach any of the non-combatant population in the Gaza Strip. And
I just want to note, be like non-combatant population as opposed to the civilian population. The word is civilian population. Yeah. But they're being very careful. Now, of course, we know that Joe Biden a couple of days ago basically said, what they're doing at the Al-Shifa is not like the indiscriminate bombing they were doing before. So the idea that they've been surgical is really a joke. And again, displaced about 1.3 million people to go to the South, and now that
now not just the South, be in a specific part of the South. Go to the tent city.
Move to this tent city.
Gaza
on
is
the coast,
25 miles long, and it ranges between 3.7 and 7.5 miles wide in terms of width. So when we're talking
two Manhattans,
so you've gone to the South at this point, which they're also bombing. But you're not in the right part of the South at this point to avoid the Israeli bombardment, which is just like they want them all out of Gaza.
But, Matt's point of it in terms of width, that you're talking about two Manhattans. I mean, walking across town is not really a chore per se in terms of like a distance, for, massive bombing going on. The idea that you could be like on First Avenue and they're just completely leveling, the West Side Highway is nuts. And the idea that you're going to basically take already when you had 3 million people, the densest place on the planet, and now you're saying basically we want to put all those people into 1/4 of that same landmass. It's just absurd. But continue here.
Population in the Gaza Strip, and I think that there is no way that we can eradicate the Hamas without dealing with most of its forces that have fled to the south. Now, again, one little note, the non-combatant population in the Gaza Strip is really a non-existent term because all of the Gazans voted for the Hamas. And as we have seen on the 7th of October, most of the population in the Gaza Strip are Hamas. Nonetheless, we are treating them as non-combatant. We are treating them as regular civilians, and they are spared from the fighting.
General Kimmett,
He just
What
moves
does he
on.
say? Does he
no,
just
he
move
moves
on?
on. I've seen the full clip. He just moves on.
I mean-
Not one follow-up question on that front. So I'm not sure what is more egregious, the outright admission that they don't see any people in Gaza as non-combatants or as civilians, or the fact that Anderson Cooper, who is probably one of the highest paid anchors in
your
the
job.
country, just moves on from a statement of explicit ethnic cleansing and then also admitted collective punishment, both war crimes, and just goes on to the next question. I mean, unfathomable.
This is Osama bin Laden's logic,
Exactly.
incidentally. But I will say this, that arguably, if you're just going to take it on the merits of this argument that Rami Igra is making, it is true that Osama bin Laden had the same sort of like calculus. But you have to say, if you're going to accept that calculus, the argument Osama bin Laden had made more sense, was sounder. Because A, Hamas won with a razor-thin majority. B, half the country was not even alive at that time, never mind voting age. So if you compare that, and I would say, 3, that at the time of that election, there was not the sort of like, easy democracy that we have in this country. And we, subsequent to that election too, very hard to say that Palestinian citizens had the same sort of influence. Obviously, there wasn't an election in the 16, 17 years since then, but very hard to say that Palestinians had the same sort of control over their government as we do here. I mean, just so if you're going to accept that that argument, the structure of that argument, you have to say that bin Laden had a stronger case based upon that. Now, I don't personally accept that argument, but Israel does.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And again, just to put a point on my criticism of Anderson Cooper here, just today it came out, I believe it was calculated by the Committee to Protect Journalists, that 48 journalists and media workers have been killed since October 7th. Obviously, those deaths are in Gaza, and I think maybe even in the West Bank. I'm not exactly sure. Again, fog of war, but at least 48 journalists and media workers killed. And the fact
Hundreds of UN workers.
yeah, the Israeli government is doing that on purpose so that they can come out and make these claims that Gaza just, it deserves to be collectively punished because they support Hamas. And you have journalists sitting in their studios in the United States just taking that at face value and completely abdicating their duty here.
It is shocking to allow that to slide by.
Well, and I mean, what it is like our mainstream media can't decode this as anything other than a maybe brutal but anti-terror effort. And it's not an anti-terror effort. It's an anti-Gaza, anti-Palestinian effort disguised as an anti-terror effort that uses terror, including targeting journalists, as part of that tactic.
And it's amazing to me that the political education about Israel's tactics on that front seems to be starting on October 7th for our most prominent reporters in this country. I mean, we've been covering this for since I've started here, and even before when I was at TYT, I had an understanding that Israel uses these kinds of tactics a lot. Shireen Abu Akleh, that happened 2 years ago or last year. I mean, come on, let's get an understanding and not just say, oh, whoopsie. Obviously, the Israeli government means to do the right thing. It's clearly not the intention.
Yeah.
Let's wise up
We
here.
need to mature a little bit in our mainstream media.
And just because he speaks English and because he has lighter skin than some of the Palestinians doesn't necessarily mean that what he says is truthful, Anderson Cooper.
I also think that there is probably a lot of corporate pressure to discourage
Yep.
any type of questioning that would lay bare what that guy is saying.
Keep Mehdi off the show.
Exactly.
All those kind of guys.
I mean, I think to MSNBC's credit, I
Yep.
think like once there
Right.
was that pushback about them pulling
And Velshi.
Valshi and Mehdi Hassan and Ayman Molinari off the airways, or at least like sort of quasi benching them, as it were. Once there was that pushback, I think they basically said like, okay, we can't get away with this.
Yeah, good job Semaphore uncovering that, and also good job Joy Reid, who stands with her Muslim colleagues and has been doing good work. And she has a nightly show, right?
Yeah.
So that's also, I think, added credit to her on that front.